Hey guys, what's up? Kalamaza here. What we're going to be looking at today are the new island expeditions on the World of Warcraft battle for Azeroth Alpha. They're basically a three-man PvP PvE type of scenario that you queue for, in which your goal is to collect Azurite. A group of opposing faction forces are collecting Azurite as well, and the first group to reach 6,000 total Azurite wins. Powerful creatures, Azurite nodes, treasure chests, allies in need of aid, and many more things will grant you Azurite. You and your party can see concentrated Azurite sources on the map that are close to you, and after several minutes, which is actually 10 minutes, your Azurite detector comes online, showing you all the remaining Azurite on the island. Shrines, food, and objects around the island may turn the tides more into your favor, while also having some monsters on the island being much more powerful than others, so be sure to watch out. So at this point in time, there's only actually one expedition map available for testing, and what I can see, there's actually two current spawn points you can spawn. One is up north, more so towards a camp, and one is on the south here, where you see with one right now. And you can see him initially coming off the boat, and the first mob we see here is named Elder Claw. He's one of the 8 or so mini boss higher health type mobs you see in the island, and killing him as well as the other mobs around him give Azurite. Now, for the most part, Elder Claw doesn't really have very many threatening abilities. He does an ability called Acid Surge, you can see here, which is basically a green translucent circle on the ground that does a large bit of damage if you stand in it. Basically, just move out of it. It's pretty easy to see. Besides that, he does a small range attack. As you can see, he's throwing these small green globules at players here. Besides that, it doesn't really do much damage. Those are the only actual abilities he has. He does spawn 7 to 8 smaller worms around him. They can easily just be cleaved down. They don't have a lot of health at all. Another thing you're going to notice here is that the small yellow orb spawns when Elder Claw is killed. Picking up or touching this orb actually gives you a 30-second debuff, which is more so realistically sort of a buff as well. It gives you a flat 50% damage increase at the cost of 50% additional damage taken. And the thing is that it does stack. However, it's only a 30-second debuff, which means to, get it to continuously stack, you need to be killing elite mobs or these small, packs of these larger mini bosses quickly enough to get multiple orbs to spawn. The next mini-boss that we actually encounter, his name is the Shadow Web Huntress, and realistically she's only a few paces up the beach from our last mini-boss. She's surrounded by a few other smaller spider mobs, but realistically they weren't much of a challenge at all for our group, and to be honest, she only has about 300,000 health herself. Noting that when we actually killed her, she drops anywhere between, I believe it's around 240 to 280 Azurite, and we figured out later on that most of all the mini-bosses on the island actually drop somewhere between that number. I did find that it differed a bit between every individual boss. I don't think it's the same every single time. I wasn't able to kill each one multiple times, but I believe it's for just a random number between there. One thing to also make note of here is that you did see that yellow orb spawn there again. It is the same one that gives the stacking debuff 50% damage taken, but a 50% damage increase as well for 30 seconds. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to stack it with the other one from the first boss, but I would believe that later on certain strategies will most likely emerge where it comes to stacking multiples of that debuff. Another thing to make note of there is that after we did kill that mini boss, I did pick up that item. This one's actually called the Sticky Starfish, and it puts this action button in the middle of my screen. Using it stuns the target and increases its damage taken by 10% for 20 seconds. And there are many items like this around the island that you'll see here, just like the shovel that I actually just picked up. Now, the Sticky Starfish and items like it are usable on any mob on the island. You can use it on something like its basic Hydra here, or you can use it on one of the mini bosses like we just encountered when we first came off the boat, or you can also use it on the enemy faction's team. One thing to note as well is that if you look towards the top of your screen, you'll see an Azurite counter. And an Azurite counter basically just tallies up how much Azurite both you and the opposing faction has collected. Now, if you notice, I also have a stacking debuff on me, which is right around 230 or so currently. It's a stacking debuff called Azurite Residue, which ends up capping at 250, and it's basically the value that you're worth towards the opposing faction Azurite-wise. Now, as you can see here around the island, there are these Azurite nodes you can mine. They give 75 Azurite each, and while that might not seem like a whole lot, it does quickly add up. If you look towards the top of your screen, you'll also see your Azurite counter. If you look below it, you'll see a bit of a timer with a duration on it. And that's how long you have left until the actual Azurite detector comes live. It's basically 10 minutes from the start of the island, and when it does come live, it reveals all the remaining Azerite on the island. So if you're not able to find all the smaller Azerite hubs initially, or even some of the larger ones, it's not that big of a deal, because later on they'll all be revealed that you can very easily walk up to them and just mine them on their own. Now, while I have mentioned most of the ways to actually gain Azerite on the island, there's one thing I didn't mention yet, and that's actually engaging the enemy AI team on the island. Now, I did mention earlier that they also have the same stacking Azerite debuff as you, which means that the initial engagement between the two teams is worth roughly 250 Azerite per player. Now, if you're able to kill their entire team without losing anybody on yours, it means you'll gain a net profit of 750 or so Azerite. However, one thing to keep in mind as well is that if they kill a member of your team or more than one, they also gain roughly 250 Azerite per kill as well. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention here is that the comp of the enemy team is not something that you actually know beforehand, and realistically you don't even know it before you initially engage them. I know for a fact on my first expedition that the team actually had a rogue on it. I know this team specifically has both a frost mage and a frost DK, even though I don't specifically remember what a third member of this team was. Now, one thing I have to admit is that when Blizzard initially mentioned how the teams would work on the expeditions, basically with the AI teams being, based around PvP, I was a bit skeptical. I really didn't know how they were actually going to pull off and bring the actual PvP element into, a match with 3 actual players, against 3 basically AIs. I have to admit that I was pleasantly surprised. In all of my PvP encounters in the actual expeditions, there was a very high level of play from the AI, something I did not expect. In my previous expedition, when I actually encountered the rogue, he was using sap, he was using gouge, all these abilities that realistically you wouldn't expect, an AI to be using, especially at the right time. There were instances where they actually would CC a member of our team and try and take out the other 2, and there are also instances of them actually just focusing down a member of our team. Realistically, that member died within a few seconds, and there really wasn't a whole lot you could do, unless you knew preemptively that they were focusing that person down, and it actually did bring, a pretty close feel to actually being in an arena or a PvP match, which is something that I did not expect whatsoever, but it was a very pleasant surprise overall. Now, at this point in the game, we've surpassed the 10-minute mark, so our Azerite detector is online. If you look at the map, you'll see a lot of points of Azerite that you can actually go to and just straight up mine. And you'll also see, if you look at the map right now, which we're currently engaging the Alliance team again as well. If you look past our initial engagement, once you come relatively close to them on the map again, their icons begin to appear as 3 individual Alliance banners. Now, at this point in the game, things start to get pretty hectic and pretty crazy. You'll see here as well that there are other new random mini-bosses start spawning, which also provide a lot of Azerite. And at the same time, the Alliance team also knows where the large Azerite nodes are at this point. So you can fully expect them to come back and re-engage you again as well. And one thing to make note of is that, especially if you're close together on Azerite for both teams here, you're still currently carrying your 250 or whatever your debuff's currently at. A recently killed team doesn't really have much to lose to come back and initially re-engage you, especially if your team's still hindered or down a person or 2, because they don't have their stacking Azerite debuff at 250 anymore. So, however, if your whole team survived the last engagement, you're worth roughly 750 Azerite to them. Now, as I did mention before, the gameplay between the Alliance and Horde factions really picks up even more so towards the end of the game, with it being in their best interest to actually just kill your team because of your current stacking Azerite residue debuff. You can expect to be engaging them almost pretty much initially right after they respawn, whenever you kill them or whenever you die, and respawn accordingly. Now, one thing to make note of here is that we basically are right outside the Alliance respawn point for whenever we kill their team. They basically started the expedition right over the hill behind us here, and being pushed this far back into their base and their respawn point, they really don't have very far to go to actually reach our team again once they actually die. Now, strategically, it probably would have been a little bit better to actually push back down more so towards our part of the beach where we started the map, and collect the rest of the remaining Azerite that we needed there, but this is just sort of where we ended up, and this is where the actual new mini-bosses ended up spawning, and it's sort of just more so how it played out. Overall, I was very impressed with the new expeditions. I thought that the PvP AI was great, it was very interactive, and a lot better than I thought it would be overall. And I felt that the expeditions were great and had a really awesome new feel to them in general. Let me know what you guys thought of the expeditions below in the comments. If you want to see more Battle for Azeroth content, remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Thanks so much.